How you doing? We're going to watch a fight. So this is one that cropped up in the comments. I think it was probably me that brought this one up. I'm so thrilled that so many of you are getting on board with this, and I've had just a vast amount of suggestions for fights that you want me to take a look at and react to. So this isn't actually truly a reaction fight, but it's, you know, I've seen it before. This is James Thompson versus Alexander Emelianenko. When Looking Tough Goes Wrong was the video that did the rounds. It's got, you know, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of views. This is one of those classic fights. It became a bit of a meme, and I've got a bit of insight into this that maybe you haven't seen before, not sure. So let's have a look, we'll have a bit of a watch, and let's be honest, what I'll probably do is stop the video a lot and talk to you a lot, because it's kind of what I do. So here goes. So, there's James Thompson. This is Pride. Fantastic fights. I love Pride. I love Pride. If you haven't watched all the old Pride fights, please do. I think they were bought out by the UFC a while ago. They're all on Fight Pass. You can go back and watch them, all of Sakuraba's old fights, James Thompson's fights, the Emelianenko's. Just some brilliant stuff there. There's some weird stuff as well, some great mismatches, and this has clearly been set up to be a bit of a mismatch. You've got James Thompson, who's huge, Colossus, he was known as, and he was fighting against Alexander Emelianenko, Fedor's brother, who was utterly emotionless, a little bit chubby, relatively heavily tattooed, looks like a massive underdog in this. I'll shut up and let you get on with it.
L'anglais James Thompson. Il fait peur.
He's a bit tense, isn't he?
Regardez ça.
And there's Alexander Emelianenko looking like he doesn't care, Fedor in the background. And yeah, we're good to go. Now this isn't a long fight, so don't, if you haven't seen this before, don't blink, because you might miss it.
Et regardez la différence de comportement. James Thompson, complètement tétanisé de concentration.
I'm not sure why I appear to be watching a French version.
Relax, complètement relax.
Très relax, ouais.
But yeah,
Et Thompson
here we go.
a pour habitude, là je ne trahis aucun secret, de courir et de foncer
sur son adversaire
dès que ça commence. Et
Ah,
là,
voilà.
regardez.
Et ouais, c'est parti. Il a touché,
il a poussé Alexander. Maintenant, il faut se replacer par contre parce qu'Alexander
il a pris un coup là.
On l'a touché.
Il est touché l'anglais. Ouais.
Bon, c'est déjà terminé.
And that's your lot. Clearly, there's a lot more of this video. Don't quite know what's going on there. We're gonna go back, and I'm gonna give you some of the insight and the background I have. I need to let you know that I know James. I like him a lot, and I've got a huge amount of respect for him, both as a person and a fighter. I've trained with him on a number of occasions, and he's genuinely a really nice guy. He's also hard as nails, but you know, there you go. I've got some lovely. Can we put some pictures in here? I don't know why I'm asking. It's me that edits. Yes, we can put some pictures in here. Is me with James. But anyway, there are some things we need to bear in mind here. James Thompson had fairly recently got into fighting. He was a bodybuilder, he was a big guy, he was used to being a bit tough. He'd been working, I think, as a debt collector in the UK. He'd got into the early cage fighting scene, Ultimate Championship in the UK. He'd won the heavyweight championship of that, and he'd been signed by Pride to come in and fight. At this point, he'd been fighting, when he stepped into the ring against Alexander Emelianenko, he'd been fighting for less than 2 years, just over 18 months, something like that. This was his first professional fight. He was in Japan. He was, you know, he's he was an English guy who'd gone out to Japan, first professional fight, stepped into the ring. He had no idea what was going on at this point. This was such a huge step up, what was effectively the biggest mixed martial arts platform in the world. And he'd come from little backyard fights in England to this. And he didn't really know who he was fighting. The other thing that you need to know about him is that while this was going on, his brother was undergoing chemotherapy for leukemia. And James was stressed, he was worried, and he poured all of his emotion into the start of this fight. He's gone on record as saying he had no idea what he was doing. He just knew that, he was a big guy, he was naturally pretty good, and he used his strength and his aggression to carry him through. And that's what he did. So he poured all of his emotion, all of his upset, all of his anger into this one fight, and he kind of tried to put it all on Alexander Emelianenko. And he was telling himself at the time that, maybe if he'd win this, maybe his brother would be cured. And, he's not a stupid man. People think he is because he looks like a bit of a meathead, but he's actually quite insightful when you get talking to him. He knows this wasn't the case, but he'd kind of got that in his head. So as soon as the bell rang and the referee dropped his hands, he went barreling in there. He'd done that a few times before in some of his earlier fights to some success. He'd beaten Dan Severn, I think, which is what got him into Pride. But it didn't work out quite so well for him at this point. And I think it's really interesting. You can see with this stare down at the top that he's really focusing everything in his part. And I think that Emelianenko actually looks a little bit nervous at this point. Normally he doesn't at all, and at the very beginning he didn't. But when they came together and they had that stare off, just as we're backing away, let's go back and watch that again. Just watch Emelianenko. I think that he's not quite as calm as he likes us all to think.
James Thompson, complètement tétanisé de concentration.
That's quite an intense stare, isn't it?
Relax.
You'll see it just now.
Relax, complètement relax.
See, I think,
Et Thompson a pour
he's not scared, but I think he's a little bit nervous.
de courir et de foncer
Sur son
sur
adversaire.
ses adversaires dès
Look
que
at
ça
that
commence.
neck.
Et là,
And here you go.
Et ouais, c'est parti.
Bang.
Il a touché,
il a
il a
poussé,
réussi à
oui, il a
pousser.
réussi.
And let's be honest, if it had been anyone other than an Emelianenko, that could have been the end of the fight. As he went running in, he literally threw that right in and caught him and it dropped him. And it's not the greatest punch in the world, but, he's not called Colossus ironically. He's a big man. I mean, I'm not small. I'm 6 foot, 220 pounds. And when I was training with James, I was in pretty good shape, and he made me feel small and insignificant. He's a big, strong man, and he's not scared. He's perfectly able to do this. And when that man hits you, or when that man chokes you out, or when that man picks you up and slams you on the floor and lands on top of you, I can say this from personal experience, you've been slammed, or you've been hit. So the fact that Emelianenko got up after that punch is in itself quite something. And you can see at this point that that's all it is, and it's become a bit of a brawl. And I think that's a shame, really. But that's where Emelianenko kind of comes into his own. You might put him down, he's going to get straight back up again. He knows what he's doing, he's quite experienced, he himself is a bit of a tough guy, and I strongly suspect that the not very affluent Russia that he grew up in, is he Russian? I'm assuming he's Russian. I'm saying all this assuming he's Russian, and I don't know. I'll have to check. Let me know, stick something in the comments. But I know that, that the England that James Thompson grew up in probably wasn't quite as deprived. So, you've got effectively two brawlers going at each other here. And one of them is very, very inexperienced at this level. And that's James. And you can see what happens because of that. Some little punches coming in, and they're pretty well targeted. They're nice, tight, little circular, little hooks to the side of the head. And he's landing a few of these, and James is soaking them up. I think it's quite. I mean, it's to Emelianenko's credit that he got up again and started doing this. But I think it's also to James Thompson's credit that he managed to soak up some of these until that one catches him pretty square.
Courir et de foncer
Sur son
sur ses
adversaire.
adversaires dès que ça commence. Et là, ben regardez.
Et ouais, c'est parti. Il a
Ah,
touché
mais il a
là, il a
poussé.
réussi à
Ah oui, il a
pousser.
réussi. Il a poussé Alexander. Maintenant, il faut se replacer.
Yeah,
Par contre,
and there was the mistake actually. If we go back and look at that again, I'm not going to skip back too far, but you can see what happens as James comes rushing over to try and finish the fight. What he's trying to do is get some kind of clinch, get some hold, because he knows that that's where he's gonna win. If he can get hold of this guy. Now, he probably doesn't realise Sambo at this point. The James Thompson of 2003, 2004 is not a grappler. James Thompson now is somewhat more experienced and skilled in grappling. He's done a lot of catch training and he knows his stuff, But in this, he probably doesn't, but he knows if he can get hold of somebody, he's got a really good chance of doing that. So when he's coming in, instead of landing another punch like the one that dropped him, he goes to try and clinch and take hold of him. And at that point, Emelianenko starts landing those little tight hooks, both hands, and staggers James a little, gives himself a little bit of space, and then gives himself the kind of the space and the freedom to drop him. So you can see here.
Il a poussé Alexander. Maintenant, il faut se replacer. Par contre, parce
Attention, il a pris un coup là.
on l'a touché.
Yeah, bang. But he gets back up again, and that's beautiful.
Oh, c'est déjà terminé. C'est déjà.
And there's a little bit of me that thinks that was stopped too early. I don't know about you. And I think that in a lot of James's fights throughout his career, there's one thing that does seem to be relatively recurring, and that's that they do seem to be stopped a little bit early. Now, I don't think he would have gone on to win this fight, but I do think that perhaps if they'd left that a little bit longer, maybe he could have got back up to his feet and we could have had a little bit more fun. Now, it may just be that Emelianenko would have just dropped him again, and maybe stopping it was exactly the right thing to do. But we could argue that the fight with Kimbo that caused Thompson's ear to burst was stopped a little bit too early, and that I think when we go back and look at that, and we might have to do that, I think Thompson was definitely on top in that fight, and if they'd stopped it and gone to points, he'd have won it clearly. But because his ear was a bit of a mess, the fight was given to Kimbo, and I think that James Thompson has always been a little bit upset that was the case. He's joked about the fact that his ear's more famous than him. And, that original fight between James Thompson and Kimbo Slice is one of the most watched fights of all time. And I think that's the key here, is that whatever happens, when James Thompson steps into the ring, it's going to be entertaining. And I think that's why the Japanese brought him over for Pride, because he's got real character and he's got something about him. And at this point in this fight, he knew that he'd ruined it. He had this chance for glory, to be on the big stage and to perform and to actually make something of his fighting career. And he knew he'd blown it at this point. And he went out from the ring, back to his changing room, and he thought he'd completely messed it up. But the people who run Fight came to him and just said, James, everybody loved it. Everybody wants to see it again. We love you. We want you to fight more. And he went on to record 3 wins in his next 3 Pride fights. So this wasn't a great start for him. And let's face it, he probably didn't deserve to win. But he actually used it as a stepping stone and did something pretty fantastic off the back of it. So there's not a lot to really talk about technically in the fight here. James Thompson, at this point, wasn't a great skilled fighter. Emelianenko, I don't think he was a particularly skilled fighter too, but you've got to give him some credit for those hooks. They were nicely targeted and they landed. And between the two of them, they both showed a lot of heart. And it's a shame that this fight was over so quickly, because I think that they both deserve to have a longer fight from this, but it was probably the right result. So, if you're watching, James, sorry, mate. what do you think? I mean, I'm guessing that you've seen this fight before, you've watched it here with me, and I'm guessing that you probably have some opinions about it. Have I said anything that's new to you? And if I have, what do you think? Has it changed the way you feel about this fight? Stick something in the comments. Let me know. And yeah, let me know what fight you want me to do next. I've got a list of a lot of fights that people have suggested. It's far easier for me, from my point of view, if you can send me a YouTube link to a fight. Now, I know YouTube will take that comment and not show it, but I'll go, I'll make a point of checking those comments that are being held for review and putting them out there. And even if I just make a note of the link in my list of fights, it does make my life easier. So yeah, I hope this has been of some interest to you. I hope you're well, and I'll see you soon.